If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. My name is Garry. I'm one of the pastors here. Welcome to the Meeting Place live stream. Before we get going this morning, I just want to take a few moments to personally thank everyone that is here with me in Theater 6 at the Avalon Cinemas, our music team, our sound teams, our media teams, our lighting teams, all here making what's happening right now possible. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate you guys. I also want to thank all of you for tuning in. These are strange times we find ourselves in, but we do have the technology to keep things going, and for that I'm grateful. I want to thank you for your understanding. It's been a crazy week, to say the least, for all of us, and we are doing our best as the leadership and our staff to make and discern the most loving steps that we can take in response to what's happening in our city and around the world. And thank you for making this church awesome. You guys are really the awesome sauce that makes that happen. I got a confession to make, though. It's really hard standing here delivering a message for reasons you might not think. It's hard standing here knowing that some of you may be taking this service in wearing nothing but boxers or less. But you know what? We do say we are a church that says, hey, come as you are. There is no dress code, so I guess we do get what we ask for. I'm just thankful we're meeting live stream. But wherever you are, whatever you're wearing or not wearing, we're just really glad that we get to spend some time together this morning. We're in a series called Crossroads, have been for a couple of weeks, but with all that has transpired over the last few days and few weeks, just going to push the pause button on that and take some time to talk about what is going on in our city, our province, our country, and around the world, and do my best to hopefully bring some calm and some peace to some of the panic and chaos that we see unfolding before us. Thoughts of worry and fear that can so easily dominate our thoughts. Because the only story that is making news right now has to do with this new virus now called the COVID-19 that has quickly made its way around the world. You know, at this point, it seems the only thing spreading faster than that virus is panic and fear and worry, which is evidenced by what's happening on the stock markets and in the supermarkets. On the stock markets, we have panic selling. In the supermarkets, we have panic buying. Maybe you saw this picture on social media. It was making the rounds on Friday. This was the lineup outside of Costco here in Nanaimo on Friday. I know what I would have said to my wife if we pulled in and saw that lineup. I would have said, keep driving. There's no way. It's crazy times. And I don't know where you're at with this whole thing. They're saying that, people are either on one end of the spectrum, it's like, it's nothing, don't worry about it, to absolute panic and fear, and then everything in between. I don't know where you land with that. But what I want to do this morning is I want to share with you just quickly my experience and journey that I've been on as this pandemic, as it's now been called, has unfolded because, well, I think I'm a lot like you, and some of the thought processes and stuff I've gone through, you've probably gone through, and I think you'll find it helpful. I first came across this story back in December, and at the time, it was nothing more than a subset story, kind of relegated to the bottom of my news feed of this web page I was following. It was probably a size 3 font or something. It was just really inconspicuous in the bottom. New virus in Wuhan, China, and that's about all it said. A couple of days later, though, it was getting more screen real estate. Is now about halfway down the page, had about a size 15 font, big block letters. Virus continues to spread, had a couple of pictures on it. And so I was starting to gain interest in this story. It had my attention. But here's the thing, because it was in China, a half a world away, I wasn't really all that concerned. I was watching more out of curiosity, like, wow, this is interesting watching this thing unfold. But as the numbers grew, so did the story. Now it was the headline on every news feed. By mid-December, reports of it spreading from China and possibly into South Korea began to emerge. By mid-January, there were reported cases of it in the U.S. The virus that was once a world away was now on our shores, according to the news anyway. I say that because in my mind, I couldn't help but think that this was the media doing what the media does best, sensationalizing a story in order to get viewership, to get the clicks, to get the hits. Words like apocalyptic and pandemic began cropping up here and there in some of the headlines, which pretty much has the same effect as yelling shark on a beach in Hawaii. You know, it just creates panic. And I'll be honest, by the end of January, man, I was fed up even listening to this anymore. It was all doom and gloom, and it's all anyone was talking about. And it seemed so disproportionate to what was actually happening, or seemed to be happening. It was all people were talking about. Every conversation I was having started like this, something like this, you know. Hey, did you hear what happened? Did you hear the latest? Did you see the latest post on Facebook? Man, it's looking really bad. It's not looking good at all. I saw this and I heard that. And I was just like, you know what? I can't deal with this anymore. Now, being a guy, most of us as guys, we like to fix things. We like to take care of things. And this was something I clearly could not fix or take care of. And how that manifested for me is I ignore things when I can't fix them. I just dismiss them, hoping that they'll just go away. And that's a strategy I kind of deployed and applied to this situation with his virus. I just dismissed it and went, you know what? I don't want to hear about it anymore, and maybe it'll just go away. And so here's how it showed up for me. I'd be sitting down talking with somebody, and they'd say, hey, did you see the post on Facebook? And I go, you know what? Come on. It's a cold. It's not that bad. The press is doing what the press does best, and they're blowing things out of proportion. They're spinning this thing up, and everyone is getting panicky. They're full of angst and worry and fear. It's just ridiculous. Just chill out. Calm down. That was my attitude. Because it seemed as though the media was focusing on this death rate, how many people were dying. And when you compare it to other illnesses, I got to admit, it doesn't seem as deadly as some of the flus and other viruses that have swept around the globe throughout history. Any reports from health or governmental officials and agencies released, where they're saying, hey, the risk of infection is really low, seem to get quickly buried through stories of mass infection rates. There was so much cross-information happening that you didn't know who to believe or trust anymore. And so in my mind, I just decided to not listen to anything anymore, just believe that this thing was overblown, and I just refused to buy into the hype that was brought on by a very well-spun story. Then things started to hit closer to home. At the beginning of March, Peter, our youth pastor, and I were talking one day after staff about the upcoming missions trip that the city youth were to take to go down and help build a school for some children down in Mexico. But in light of all that was unfolding around us down in Seattle and in Vancouver and across Canada, there was talk about these 14-day quarantines that were happening in New York. We were wondering, and I was like, wow, man, should they be going on this trip? But it was still 2 weeks away, so we thought, you know what, let's just continue to monitor this, see how it all rolls out, and we'll just keep the discussion going. 1 week later, on Monday, March 9th, it seemed canceling the trip was all but the best course of action. But to help us make a wise decision based on information that we would consider credible, kind of filtering through all the stuff, I got a hold of some medical professionals that I know in our community that I trust, including an infectious disease specialist, to get their take on what was going on. And I just simply asked the question, how do you think we should respond to this? Well, with all that was going on, we had, interestingly, scheduled a leadership team meeting the week before to just talk about this stuff. Talk about what do we do if our government, like some of the other governments we were hearing, began to limit large gatherings. Well, at the time, you know where my head was at? It's like, we're not even close to that yet. But, you know, it doesn't hurt to talk about it, so I guess, sure, we'll put it on the agenda and we'll talk about it. We added the Mexico trip thinking, well, you know, we'll get some recommendations, hopefully hear back from some of these medical specialists, and we can make recommendations based on that. Wednesday morning, Peter calls me, and he says, hey, just to let you know, I just heard from the church that we're partnering with down in Victoria, and they have decided, with all that's going on, they are going to pull the pin on the trip. We're not going. It's just the safest thing to do is just to stay home. So that was one thing off the agenda. About 2 hours later at noon, I heard back from the infectious disease specialist here in Nanaimo. And it was at that point that my perspective began to shift. Up to that point, it was, you know, I was just blowing this whole thing off as just media hype. It was just a big hype show. But here's what he said to me in his email. I'm just going to read a section of it. And this is asking him, what do you think we should do as a church? And here's how he answered. He says, it is abundantly clear that one of the most effective control measures and almost certainly preventative is social distancing and crowd avoidance. I feel it would be both a responsible step to protect the vulnerable parishioners and a signal to the community that we are doing our part to protect our community and our church by streaming rather than congregating and doing it now. At this point, there was no directive or recommendation from the government or medical officials to refrain from meeting in larger groups. And so right away, I'm thinking, well, even in light of this info, that's a pretty bold move to make. I mean, I love being here. I'm having a hard time. I'm an extrovert. I'm just like, I need a hug right now. I'm just starting to sweat. But after much discussion and prayer with the leadership team, we thought, you know what? We got to move to Livestream right away. And that's the decision we made. And I'll be honest with you. In my heart and in my bones, I knew it was the right decision. But I was still scared to death. Because I was pretty sure that there was going to be people that would hear about the decision and say, you guys have just got caught up in all the hype, all the fear, and you've made a decision based on fear. And if I'm completely honest, I didn't want to be seen as someone who had been sucked in by all the media hype. But I want you to know that the decision to go live stream was one that was not made out of fear or even necessarily being, unnecessarily cautious. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with responding in love. Love for you and love for our city. There are so many people who are afraid and anxious, and you know what? It's hard not to be. When we're being bombarded with the news we're being bombarded with minute after minute, hour after hour, it's just the numbers keep climbing and the doom and the gloom that's coming with it. It's really easy to find yourself in that headspace. But here's the thing. As Christ followers, as followers of Christ, we do not have to be afraid. Easier said than done, I know. And I am not in any way trying to diminish what you may be feeling right now. You may be feeling worried or anxious for a loved one or for yourself, and I get that. But if you're feeling that way, I just want to share some words from God Himself to people who found themselves in a very fearful situation, much like we do. And as I read them, just let them wash over you. And one way I found to do that, especially with these first words I'm going to read, is put your name in the story. It just personalizes it like that. Listen to these words from God to His people who were kind of afraid of what was going on, the what ifs and the I don't knows. He said, Garry, I'll use my name. Garry, Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. Garry, I will strengthen you and I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Another time, he said, be strong and courageous. Don't be terrified. Don't be discouraged. For the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. And then Paul, a guy we talk about a lot around here who wrote almost half of what is now known as the New Testament, wrote these to some people who were afraid. He said, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Those are such encouraging words to hang on to in the midst of what we're going through. And here's a suggestion. I suggest that we would all put those words somewhere we can have quick access to them. Print them off and hang them on your fridge. Put them on your phone as a background or wallpaper on your computer screen. That way, whenever you pick up your phone, go on your computer, go to your fridge, you can be reminded that you are not alone. That God is with you and He is in this. It's not like God's looking down doing the one-handed clap. You know the one-handed clap? I didn't see that coming. Oh no. He's not doing that. He saw this long before and He's in it with us. We do not have to be afraid. You know, as the doctor said in his email that I read earlier, he said, you know, it would be both a responsible step and a signal to the community that we are doing our part to protect our community by streaming rather than congregating. You know, as I read that line, I could not help but see how that was in total alignment with our new vision statement that we rolled out last June. The vision statement that says, we want to be a church known for unleashing God's extravagant, over-the-top, ridiculous, unbelievable, unfathomable love on this city. And that genesis of that vision came from some words that Jesus spoke to a crowd of people thousands of years ago, words that I had read and heard countless times. But this time, when I read them, they leapt off the page and landed on my heart. And here's what Jesus said. He looked at a crowd of people and He said, you are the light of the world. Like a city on a hilltop that cannot be hidden. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket. Instead, a lamp is placed on a table, on a stand, where it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your Father in heaven. Put another way, what Jesus is saying, man, if there is any hope for your family, your neighborhood, your workplace, your city, your country, you got to shine. As followers of mine, you got to shine. Take my light into the dark places of your neighborhood, your world, and let my light shine through you. And boy, do we need that right now. And so I just want to go through a couple of ways we can do that as a church. To be that light, to be that beacon of hope, to unleash God's love on this city when this city needs it so desperately. And one of the ways we can do that is by live streaming. Because live streaming helps flatten the curve. If you're not familiar with that term, don't feel bad. Up till 4 days ago, I had never heard of it either. But it's a term that the medical community uses to describe the best strategy during an outbreak, whether it's the flu, a really bad cold, pneumonia, or in this case, coronavirus, to give the medical system its best chance of not getting overwhelmed with a sudden influx of patients. Social distancing and large crowd avoidance is the best way to flatten the curve. because it slows down the spread of the infection, thereby reducing the influx of patients, which results in the medical system being able to keep up and treat those who need treatment, even those that aren't even infected with the virus but may have something else going on medically. And that's why the decision to move to Livestream wasn't an easy one, because, as of right now, there are no official reported cases of the virus here in Nanaimo. And so, again, I'll just be honest, it seemed too soon to me to kind of pull the plug on this, because this place is such a refuge for people. It's a place where people can come in who are struggling, who are searching for answers, looking for hope in a seemingly hopeless world, where they can find solace and peace, if only for an hour in the morning. And man, I don't know what your experience was last week, but I sure sensed that in this church last week. Last Sunday, this place felt like a refuge. People seemed to be glad to be able to get away from all the chaos and all the hype that was happening outside these walls and enjoy some peace and some community and some connection with one another. And so the thought of closing down our physical gathering space, it felt counterproductive to me. But it was the right thing to do, because it's the best way we can love one another and love our community. And even though right now we are not gathering together, the church can still be a refuge for people. We can still be the light that we're called to be, because the church isn't about being brick and mortar. It's flesh and blood. It's made up of people like you, people like me, who have found hope and help in the person of Jesus Christ. Plain and simple. And we just chosen to say, I can't do this anymore. I need your help. And he steps right in and he starts to help us. I can't help but think that we as a church have the best opportunity. And I'm not talking just this church. I'm talking about the church around the world. We are facing the best opportunity to be the light, the city on a hill, the beacon of hope for people who are afraid, who are worried, who don't know what's coming next. People are looking for hope. And as Christ followers, we're hope dealers and we're light shiners, because we live in the hope that is found in the only place it can be, Jesus. Besides gathering virtually, here's a few other ways that we can be a light and a beacon of hope in this city. The first thing we can do is talk to God. Pray. The best way, prayer helps us partner with God in what he's already doing, how he's already showing up. Prayer is the very thing that can help lift our eyes off of our circumstances and focus them on God, who will provide everything we would ever need, and whack worry in the head. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need. How awesome is that? And thank him for all he has done. Then you will experience, this is the beauty of this, then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can ever begin to understand. And his peace will guard your heart and guard your mind as you live in Christ Jesus. Pray for each other. Pray for your families. Pray for your loved ones. Pray for your neighbors. Pray for the doctors, the nurses, the paramedics, the hospital support staff, all those people that are on the front lines caring for those who suspect they're infected or are infected. Pray for the local, provincial, and federal governments as they work to keep our city, our province, and our country safe. And I have to say, I am impressed with the job the BC government is doing right now. They're delivering the news that we need to hear, and they're doing it in a way that's not creating panic. So kudos to them. Here's another way we can be a ray of hope. It's by reaching out to our neighbors. Be available to help, particularly to anyone who is already self-quarantined. They have mandatory 14-day quarantines for people that are arriving in our country. I think it was starting yesterday, that whether they're having symptoms or not, they just want them to self-isolate for 14 days. For the elderly who are most at risk, those with a compromised immune system, everyone should look out not only for his own interests, but also for the interests of others. And your neighbor may be glad for some support. You know, as you offer to maybe make them a meal, to go pick up some medications or prescriptions that they didn't get before they were isolated. Or maybe just a friendly voice, some calm and some peace, to let them know it's okay and they're not alone. And that you'll check in with them regularly just to see how they're doing. Now, I watched the stories on the news about the panic buying that's going on. And I heard a great quote from a pastor that I follow, and he said, "Whatever we buy for tomorrow means somebody doesn't have that for today." And so that's one way we can love our neighbors, is just not panic buy. And I'll leave that up to you on what that looks like. And here's another thing we can keep doing, is meeting together. Whether that's online like this, but more so that personal interaction in small groups. Because it's there that we can hold unswervingly to the hope we profess. For he who promised is faithful, that God will do what he's promised to do. And he is who he says he is. Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Not giving up meeting together. That's the easy thing to do right now, and it almost seems sensible on some level. But we're wired as human beings for human connection. Not giving up meeting together, but encouraging one another. And of course, when we do that, we just have to follow the protocols that are out right now. Elbow bumping, virtual hugs, stuff like that. And if you're feeling sick or coughing or whatever, just stay home. Those are just a few of the things we can do to be a light, to unleash God's love on this city. And I know there's more. And so here's what I'll say. If you have other ideas, email them to us. We would love to hear them. We'll pass them on in our weekly communications, which is what I want to talk about now. What you can expect from us as leaders and staff in the church in the days and the possibly weeks to come. This situation is fluid. It's changing constantly on an hourly basis at times. But I want you to know that the staff and the leadership will continue to evaluate the situation on a daily basis. And we will communicate with you on a weekly basis via email. If you haven't received any emails from us in the last couple of days, that means you're not on our newsletter list. And if you would like to be, so you do get those communications, you can just go to our website, themeetingplace.org, and click on the connect button, fill it out, just say, I want to be on your newsletter list. We'll add you to that for sure. But we will also update our website. So if you don't want emails, our updates will be on the website. So make sure you check those weekly. We're going to cover stuff like, are we meeting physically here? Are we going to continue live stream, things like that. So make sure you do that. If you would like prayer, simply go to the website, press on the connect button, fill out the form, and you will have a team of people praying for you or whatever you've asked for prayer for. A loved one, family member, whatever it happens to be. You know what? We are a ragtag collection of surrendered and transformed people who love God and love others. We are transfixed by his story and by his heart for this city. We are seed throwers, fire starters, hope peddlers, grace givers, risk takers, and light bearers. And we believe that small things done in great love will change the world, and definitely this city. You are the light of the world, so let's go be that. In spite of what's going on, Let's bring peace where there is panic and calm where there is chaos. Because our faith is rooted in the love and the peace of God. Really glad you joined us online. I invite you to pray with me. God, there's a lot of fear, a lot of worry, a lot of angst out there. We are in strange times, there is no doubt. But we have you as our constant. You promise that you will always be with us, even when circumstances around us scream otherwise. And so I pray for everyone that's tuned in on the line. I pray for those that are in our city that are looking for hope, that we could be that light. We all have people in our sphere of influence. And so I pray for courage for all of us to be that light, to step out and stand out in a very dark time, not only for this city and our province and our country, but the world. This is when you can show up in a really big way. And I just pray that each one of us can live out of that truth. Thank you for being with us. Continue to be with all those that are on the front lines trying to get a handle on this. And may we do our part to slow the spread of this virus down so we can get back to meeting together and life as it once was. Thank you again. We love you, and we thank you for loving us. And we pray this in your name. Amen.